All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. All right.
And
I have I that I swear I'm cursed because the freaking second I hit record, the internet shuts off and it was fine beforehand. It's been fine all day. I swear to God. All right. Well, it looks like it's
like a
okay now.
ghost, like a ghost haunting the podcast or something.
I'm starting to think I have like my FBI agent doesn't want this podcast to go very well. I don't know what I did to piss him off, but um, anyway, we're still
No
recording
worries.
because I'm
And I,
recording on
I
a
am
backup, and it's all right.
okay, cool. And I'm literally physically right next to my router. I know you said it was on your end, but just to be safe, I am like, we should be good.
Okay, it seems like there's no lag at all, which I'm very happy about. It's
Okay, good.
the last three times. This is the third time in a row I have had issues with that platform, and I freaking pay for it, And it's
Oh, weird.
I know it's, but Google Meet it loves me, I guess. Anyway, welcome back, welcome again. We're living life. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
um, I I wanted to get more like there's a lot of actors, and I like having actors on the podcast, but I've been wanting to get a lot more crew on because there's a lot more nuance that goes in behind the scenes than how much emotion that you're able to produce for the camera. There's a lot more to filmmaking for that,
Mm.
and sound is a very overlooked part of the industry. And there's actually, as far as I know, and maybe you can correct me on this, is that there's not too many uh, sound people that are available because they're always booked, and there's this like discrepancy in the
Yeah.
deficit. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's part of why I ended up in sound. I went to NKU for my degree in electronic media, and I was lucky enough to be able to PA for free on a movie that was being shot on NKU's campus when I was a freshman at the time in 2016. And they wanted a boom operator for free, which I have some issues with now as a working professional in the industry. But at the time, I was like all gung ho, like, of course, I'll do anything. And I boom operated on that, and then having that just little bit of sound experience, I kind of started hearing, everyone is needing a sound person, and I'm like, oh well, I boom operated on a thing one time, and then I kind of quickly fell into the sound hole and haven't really come out since. I really only PA'd a few times, even too. I was just talking about that on set the other day with someone, who another sound guy. We were both talking about how neither of us have really done any other job because when once you end up in sound, you're so needed. It's very hard even to try and find other work because sound is such a busy field to be in. And I'm very grateful for that.
Is there other areas other than sound that you would have interest in doing, or do you think that you just don't simply have the time for it for that creative exploration?
Oh, that's a really fascinating question. This is kind of a roundabout way of answering, and I think that'll be the whole podcast. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like a roundabout sort of person, but I the the role as a sound person is very much as a technician. And you do a lot of problem solving, and you can get creative with your problem solving, but at the end of the day, your work isn't necessarily affecting the creative output of the film in any way. Now I can think of one or two instances in which I was able to get a little creative, like there was this movie that just shot here in November. Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind, and Kelly Reichardt is known for her use of these really great soundscapes. And with her in my sound mixer,
Yeah.
um, very often I would just kind of take a spare recorder and run away from the set and just record a bunch of random sounds all around Cincinnati where we were filming. And Kelly really appreciated that, and she mentioned that she's definitely going to put them in the film. And so that was really meaningful to me as a sound person because in like 99% of the jobs I do, I mean, it's really just a technician's role. You get the mic where it sounds the best, you mic the person where they sound the best, you make sure that time code is set, you make sure that everything's synced, and then at that point you really don't have too much creative control. So I love being a sound person kind of because of that, because I am a very creative person. And when I do something creative, I put a lot of my heart and soul into it. Like
Hmm.
I to directly answer your question, I love writing. I love to write, but I don't know if I could work as a writer because because sound as a technician, if I have a bad day on set as a soundy, I don't really feel as if I put my heart and soul into it. I do feel like I've worked hard and I'm giving, the best product I can, but I'm just kind of acting as a problem solver and a technician. I would love to be able to write something and get it made someday, but um, I know at this point I've worked in the industry enough that I think I would get so bogged down about the technical aspects and the budget and how to film this in a way that's respectful to the crew while still ensuring the product. I think I would just get way too freaked out. So I do write a lot, but I don't know if I would ever get anything made unless someone died and wanted to give me like $5 million. Then I
Mm.
would become a writer.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean, if you get an inheritance, you got to run with that
Yeah,
puppy.
if anyone wants to give me $5 million, I have a script. But I just really like writing as a fun thing. And I would love to do other departments more often. I mean, my partner Matt Kennedy, who's a DP in Cincinnati, who's awesome, and I know he mentioned that you reached out to him as well. So hopefully we can have a Matt Kennedy episode in the future.
Hmm.
But Matt filmed a music video the other day, and he had me run like a really shitty handheld like camera from the '90s, and I had a ton of fun just like recording all these camera angles that don't make any sense because I don't ever do camera, and a lot of them ended up in the videos. So it's fun for me to do other roles, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself proficient. I think they put those angles in the video because they're, kind of like shitty and weird and strange. But I don't think you could hand me like an RELX and Mini LF and tell me to film a strange angle and be happy with the product.
You would look like a cinematographer though for a hot second. At least
Yeah,
they'll buy
I
you
mean,
like a
anyone.
good 15 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, anyone standing next to an RELX and Mini LF looks like a cinematographer for a few seconds until you ask them how to navigate the menu, and which is actually really easy to navigate. So I'm shooting myself in the foot by saying that, but whatever.
Yeah, you started off doing theater 8 years ago, right, with the live sound production.
Yeah, I my very first audio that I did was like plays in high school, and then that kind of carried on a bit in college. I was a live sound engineer with the Cincinnati Park Board, and I would freelance at some venues in Cincinnati, where I would do like predominantly monitors and patchwork. I would occasionally run front of house, and that was really fun. I love doing live sound, and I'd love to do more of it. Film sound just at the end of the day, film sound pays a little bit more for less work. Live sound doesn't pay quite as well, so you have to work more. So I kind of more so fell into film sound because of that.
Okay. When you first started getting on set as a paid person, not just as a PA, because like if someone's doing something for free, then for better or worse, some mistakes can go under the radar because people are just trying to actually get the thing done in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're working with the flexibility of people's their time and their goodwill. But when you first started taking paying gigs, what was the skill set that you quickly adapted to be able to have in order to identify mistakes for things that would screw you up later in post production while you're on set?
Oh, wow, that's an awesome question. Wow. Um, Gosh, well, I can definitely tell you that I made a lot of mistakes, and I still make a lot of mistakes. And um, gosh, I mean, I think one of the best things you can do as a sound person is and I feel like this is for any department really. I think just having a really good personality and being open to communicate, because I made a ton of mistakes, and a lot of my mistakes I wouldn't know that I would make them until like later. They'd be like, "Hey, post came back to me and like the feed that you sent to one of the cameras was fucked up," or like, post comes back to me 3 weeks later and is like, "Hey, there's something wrong with the time code. None of the clips are syncing." And so it's you're always going to find out, like someone's going to tell you, you might not realize, especially starting out when I don't have the technical prowess to kind of pick up what's being messed up on set. And even then, I mean, shit still happens.
Yeah.
I was just on a short film earlier that there was a time code issue that I swear to God, I check the time code every day at the beginning of the day, at lunch, and at the end of the day, and it's still having issues. So like things just happen. And one of the best things you can do is just be like easy to communicate with and having a good personality and just being humble. Sometimes it's the equipment, sometimes it's you just have to be able to talk to people when they tell you that happens, move forward, use it to try and prevent any situations from happening in the future. And I think that's the best thing you can possibly do, because you're not going to know what you need to look for until you've just been doing it for a few years. You're not going to be able to spot, this is this like time code is off by 2 seconds, or you have to check all of the camera feeds. It doesn't matter that the wavelengths on the camera look like everything's okay. You need to plug your headphones in and listen to the camera and make sure that your XLR cable didn't fuck up, or just stuff like that. You just have to have experience, and you have to be good at communicating, and just be humble when people tell you that you made a mistake. And as long as you're humble, people will hire you back. One of my favorite stories that I like to tell is a company that I worked with really early on in my career. So there's this awesome mixer in town named Brandon Weaver, who runs a company named Iron Wing, and sometimes I would do contracting work through him, and through him I got connected with him.
I know. Well, I don't know Brandon, but I knew of Brandon. Like, he was on I saw him on a set that I actually PA'd on, and he briefly looked at some work that maybe he was potentially going to do for me. But yeah, I'm actually familiar with Brandon. I know who you're talking about.
Oh yeah, Brandon's a sweetheart. He's so like incredibly nice and like crazy intelligent and hardworking. And early on in my career, he was super great in giving me a lot of contracting work when he would get double booked. And I was doing some work for him with Harris Media Co., who is also like an amazing company. Shout out to Harris Media. Everyone there is like so wonderful and good at what they do, and funny and fantastic. And so I've only been doing this for like a year. I'm still very green. I'm still like getting told about mistakes that I'm making like 2 weeks after we film, and because I'm still like learning. And then at the time I was running a Zoom F8 sound recorder, and I had just bought a Sound Devices 633 from another mixer in town, Adam Rabinowitz. I had the money ready, and I was going to meet him in a parking lot, and he was going to give me the recorder the next day. So I have a new recorder. I'm not going to use my old recorder anymore in 24 hours. But for the time I'm using my F8, which was also a mixer that I got, used. So I'm working with Harris Media, and we get I set up my boom on a C-stand, and I go to hit record, time code's good, slate's good, camera feeds are good. And then my F8 just shits itself and dies. Like, it just completely dies. So I just had to walk up to Rudy Harris and be like, I'm really sorry, my mixer just shat itself. And they were incredibly kind about it. And they had a mixer at their studio, so they just brought it up. I just used an F4, and everything ended up being okay. But I like to think that, and then I still work for them sometimes. Like, Harris Media is still fine with having me back, which is so gracious and kind of them. But it's like I understood that mixer was getting old, so I went and bought a new one. I just didn't have it yet. Like, it's not like I was, I was trying everything to the best of my abilities to not foresee that happening in any way, and it did. And I just tried to be, humble and kind on set, and just grateful and gracious for, them dealing with the issue that happened. And so I mean, yeah, if something spectacular like that can happen, but as long as you have a good attitude, that's just the best way of learning from your mistakes and moving forward from there.
Well, with when you're dealing with equipment, though, especially as a sound person, it seems to me that actually the sound equipment, in terms of continuity, actually has a lot more points of failure, technically speaking, with the equipment than, say, like the camera department, or if the production design, they have to, if the director doesn't like something, they rearrange something in front of the camera, and they just kind of, mess around and try out. But it's like all the points of failure for other departments are much more local, and they're they're easier to deal with. But as a sound person, maybe something's coming through over here, but it's not picking, but you're not noticing the problem that's going over here.
Oh, yeah.
So how is your stress levels nowadays when it comes to, making sure that every single point of failure is actually working properly?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I have been very stressed, and I get very stressed. Kind of like what I said before, you just have to keep working and have experience to understand those points of failure. You're definitely 100% correct in that. And part of it too is because everyone wants to see the camera feed, and everything sees what's happening on the camera feed. So if a light goes down, everyone on set notices, or if the camera goes down, everyone on set notices. But
there's a day of mourning, or an hour of mourning just for the camera.
But if an actor's law falls off midway through the take, I mean, ideally we're also running a boom, so we do have a safety in regards. But I mean, if I'm mixing and sending it to people's headset, the law falls off midway through the take because the actor, to use an example from the movie that I'm currently on, the actor likes to do crazy James Bond ass workout regimens like immediately before going on camera. So it doesn't matter how hard I tape that mic, he was able to exercise it off. But ideally, we also have the boom, and we might have a couple plant mics. So, people might not even notice that's happening as long as we're doing our jobs well and ensuring multiple, protections in case of failure. People won't even notice that happened, because ideally we also have the boom and some plant mics. So if his laugh sounds like shit, it should be okay. But I mean, that just comes from experience. You just kind of have to foresee certain issues and always check, check time code like crazy, check the camera feed like crazy. Just don't stop checking. Don't ever assume anything's safe. Don't ever get comfortable. So yeah, to answer your question, I do get decently stressed as a sound person sometimes, but the more experience you have, the more routine it becomes. So the less stressful it gets over time. But that's not to say that there's not going to be a set. Like the movie that I'm currently on has actually been really great. The sound team's been wonderful, and the crew has just been wonderful. So we haven't had too many points of failure. But I'm saying this, and then like the next movie is going to happen, and it's just going to be like a smack in the face, and I'll be really stressed out the whole time. So it kind of varies from project to project, and what mixer you're working with and what equipment you have. But definitely at least like a good 50% stress at any given point, and then depending on the shoot, it goes up from there.
Okay. Well, the more popular department when it comes to crew is obviously like the camera department. But when it comes, tell me a little bit about the sound department when you're on a large enough production that it's not just you with a boom pole and maybe a couple of lavs. What are the other people that you work with on those types of, either SAG or union productions that, how do those, describe to me the different roles on a larger sound unit and how they interact with each other and what their jobs are?
Sure. Yeah, this is a question that I get a lot, especially from people who might work, on smaller sets frequently, like with production houses where you just need one sound person, or in commercials where you might have like one or two sound people. So on a larger scale production, so I am an IATSE, so on typically what would be an IATSE production, so like a tier 1 or a tier 2 or even an ASA, there would be the sound mixer. So the sound mixer is the key of the department, and he is normally the one. I say he, most sound people are dudes. I say he, and I'm trying to be here like, we need more sound women, and I've just caught myself. But yeah, so the sound mixer, the sound mixer is the one who ideally just hits record. That is what they're getting paid to do. They are being paid to provide equipment and hit record. A really fascinating thing about sound people, specifically in this market in the Midwest, and in most markets that aren't like New York or LA. So here, you're going to fly in a DP from wherever, and you can hire a local camera crew, but the DP is going to rent camera equipment probably from the camera department downtown and Midwest Grip and Lighting. Mm-hmm. So the DP is getting paid a lot, but he doesn't get paid for his equipment because that equipment is being rented. The sound mixer, at least in this market in Cincinnati and in basically any market that's not like New York, LA, Atlanta, is also being paid to provide his own kit. So the sound mixer actually makes a pretty decent chunk of money because sound equipment is expensive and your kit fee is a percentage of the total cost of the gear that you're bringing. So they're getting paid a labor rate as everyone else is, but they're also getting paid for their kit. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the big thing with the sound mixer. The sound mixer hits record and provides all of the equipment. So then the next person in the department would be the boom operator. So the boom operator is obviously the one who holds the boom, but is also the liaison between the sound mixer and the set. If there's some kind of issue, when a mixer is working with a bigger cart, we can't necessarily have it next to the set. Like on a smaller set, when you're booming and bagging, you're wearing your bags. So if you see, you see an issue with a microphone or something, you're there. You, the mixer, are there to take care of it. But when you have a big sound cart, more often than not, what we'll do is the sound mixer will be anywhere from like 20 to like 300 feet away, and then we'll just cable their antennas out so we can get the RF of the microphone. So the RF antennas will be close to the set, but the mixer is just going to be wherever is convenient for the mixer to be, which might be very far away. Like the other day we were just filming on a 4th floor apartment. So the sound mixer was like on the ground floor outside with his antennas like on like a mambo, I want to say, like raised as high as they could possibly be raised, pointed at the
Yeah.
window that we were filming in. So the sound mixer could be like 4 floors away. So it's the boom operator's job to directly be next to the set, foresee any issues happening, have a good relationship, with set, very much so the camera crew and the first AD, so he can figure out where his mic goes, and he can figure out where plant mics can go. There's a mixer that I work with a lot, Jeff Maxwell, and there's a boom operator that I work with as well, Chad Jubek, who's out of Pittsburgh, and Chad and Jeff work really well together because Jeff is someone who likes to be focusing on the mix. He likes to be sitting at his cart, focusing on the mix. And Chad is really personable, and Chad is really good at running the set. So Chad and Jeff work incredibly well together because Chad is there kind of running the set for Jeff. So Jeff can take his time to focus on the mix and really get into the technical aspects of it. So then also there's me. So when I'm working with Jeff and Chad, this would be my role, is the sound utility. So the sound utility handles literally everything else that I haven't said, which if you think I've said a lot, it's not. There's so much. So the sound utility, their big role is that they mic the actors. So that's kind of the big thing. If you're terrible at miking actors, then you will never be able to work as a sound utility. That's the big one. But there's also a ton of other responsibilities. If the director and the producers and the script supervisor and probably also the first ACs want an audio feed to listen to, the utility is the one who's in charge of, rebatting and handing out the IFBs for people to be able to listen to an audio feed. The sound utility is the one who puts timecode boxes on the camera to ensure sync. The sound utility is the one that syncs the slates. So when you see the flashing timecode numbers on the slate, it's the utility that takes care of that. I have to make sure that all of those things that I just mentioned, all of them need batteries. So I have to make sure that everything is batted and doesn't die, because you can't give a headset to an important director and have it die in the middle of a take. That might get you fired. So you need to make sure that everything's, batted and perfect. What else? I very frequently will run the antenna cables that I talked about. Like, I'll get the mixer in a spot and then run the antenna cables to make sure that the mixer has, all the mics, all the RF of the mics is able to get back to the mixer. And then there's even more things, like if we need a voice of God mic, like if there's a massive crowd scene, sometimes I'll have to set up a microphone for like the first or the second AD to use to be able to talk to the crowd, and like a big speaker, so that way the crowd can hear everything that they're saying.
Oh, so you're not just providing like recording and technical equipment for the crew. You're also providing other sound things that are necessary just for the rest of the departments for interacting with other people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like voice of God is the really big one that we do.
So walkie-talkies too, right?
No, walkie-talkies that would be the AD department. There's a walkie PA that handles that. But another thing that we do, the movie The Alto Nights just came out, and that is a movie where Robert De Niro plays two characters where he talks to himself a lot. So in that movie, I did not actually mic Robert De Niro because he preferred to have his costumer mic him. I definitely would have to do things with his microphone. So I might not have put it directly on his body, but I was definitely working with him a decent amount, but in regards to his microphone. But another thing that I would do is in the scenes where he would be talking to himself, he would have to have a little earwig in so he could react to takes that he had recorded as the other character. So when there's an earwig, I will more often than not be in charge of running the earwigs, running the feed into them. We might have a Pro Tools operator on set, which would technically be the fourth sound person, but they would only be there for the days that we would have earwig playback. But there might be a Pro Tools operator editing the takes and playing them at the speed in which needs to be played for the actor to be able to comfortably respond to it. And then I would just have to make sure that the earwig works and is batted and doesn't die in the middle of a take, because if it dies in the middle of a take, you might get yelled at.
How much consideration
stuff like that. So
yeah, how much consideration does the distance between the sound mixer and the people that are on set next to the camera doing the take have to be taken into the consideration for the logistics of the production? Or do you just have antennas going everywhere? That way there's no latency between the equipment and, the mixer and the boom operator.
Sure. Finding a good spot for the sound mixer is definitely a thing that the sound department is aware of, and the other departments are aware of it too. It just depends on who your mixer is, how close they want to be to the set. when I'm working with Jeff, who I mentioned, Jeff is someone that likes to be further away. He doesn't really like to be next to the commotion of the set. So he's got a really, really long antenna cable. And then we just run one set of antennas and just get the antennas next to the set. And then Jeff's like 300 feet away smoking a cigar somewhere. But I also will work with other mixers, like my friend Zach Mueller, or I'm currently working with a mixer out of Louisville named Kevin Crisp, and they like to be next to the set. They like to be able to see what's going on. So they would most likely set up their cart probably next to Video Village somewhere, pretty close to the director. And then they might not even need to run their antennas. Sometimes, like when I'm working with a mixer like that, we'll just put the mast on the back of their cart, just raise the antenna mast, and then boom, the antennas are right there next to the set. It just depends on what mixer you're working with, and depending on the kind of mixer it is. Usually the other departments will be aware of and try and accommodate for us sometimes, but they too have their own carts that they need to find a space for. So at that point, you just have to be nice and cordial and, discuss things with them. Like, I want to put this person next to Video Village. Can I put them here?
You've got to get a lawyer. You got to write the peace treaties. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Normally people are cool about it, and normally people are good at making space, but sometimes there might be a hand. Normally my ethos is that I like to get the sound card on set as quickly as possible, so other people have to work around us. But that doesn't always happen. But if we get to set last,
early bird gets the worm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the sound department tends to at least dealing outside of the technical space and the running through the logistics of working with the other departments, make sure everything's going correctly. Creatively, it's sort of lower, it seems like, on the tier list when it comes to collaboration as to what's going on set. Sound, because they're there to accomplish a very specific task. With the sound, just make sure everything's gotten and everything's needed. But it's not like you're working. It's like not like you're the camera guy who's working with the director to create a certain vibe or a feel. Generally those creative decisions are they're moved into post-production when they do pop up with sound. And so when you're on set, you're and maybe I'm completely incorrect here, but just based on my personal experience, they tend to be the fly on the wall when it comes to the production. They're seeing everything, they're hearing everything mic'd up. What's it like to be the fly on the wall?
Oh, sure. You're not wrong in that regard at all. I do think a good sound crew is a fly on the wall. But some sound mixers and sound crews could be a little bit more loud, and that's okay. I very much like being a fly on the wall in that I am doing my job efficiently in a way that does not draw attention to our department. Assuming that we're communicating with other departments, we shouldn't need to really have to talk to them until we need to, per se. I guess an example of that would be like, we want to have a good relationship with locations, and assuming that the locations department is competent and good by the time we arrive at the location, the AC should already be off, or they picked a building that's not next to a highway, or they might have ITC outside, making sure that we don't have a bunch of cars running during the take. And, we shouldn't necessarily have to talk to them, but sometimes I might have to reach out and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I know you guys did your absolute best and the location's perfect, but there's like a weird refrigerator that just started buzzing, and then they have to take care of it. But ideally, I want to try and I love locations. If you're in a locations department, I love you. I love locations, is my favorite department. But like another example would be like the ADs. I love my ADs, and I like to have a great relationship with them. And ideally, I'm doing my job efficiently enough to where, when the cast shows up on set, they're already mic'd. ADs don't have to worry about that. I'm not needing to do a million touches on their microphone. Actors are good to go. Ideally, the boom operator has spent time watching the lights get built around the set and figuring out where he can be, and watching the rehearsals and seeing where second team is standing. So the boom operator doesn't need to so the boom operator won't dip into the shot a million times. It doesn't need to ask the AD if he can get a frame line like 7,000 times. Like, assuming that we're doing our job well, we should necessarily, we should be pretty invisible. The ADs shouldn't have to worry about us, and other departments shouldn't have to worry about us. We should be doing our job efficiently and in a way that most people don't notice. And that's how I like to run my sets. But some sound mixers can be a little bit louder.
Do you think it's more advantageous to be a fly on the wall, at least in terms of the workflow efficiency?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a point that I was about to bring up. I think there's advantages to being a fly on the wall because people have a respect for what you're doing and a trust. You know, they respect that you're doing what you're doing and they trust it, and they really appreciate, because time is everything. Time is money on set. So if you're doing your job efficiently in a way that people don't notice, you're not costing production anything. So people really like you, and they like that they don't have to worry about you. I mean, the first AD has 7,000 things to worry about. So when the first AD doesn't have to worry that I'm doing my job proficiently, you know, we very quickly get in good graces with people. But as you mentioned before, we are very much a fly on the wall, and people don't often give the same considerations to sound as they would other departments. So there are a handful of mixers that I've worked with that do tend to be louder, you know, and I would say that's kind of more of a thing with older sound mixers. They tend to be a little bit more vocal, because younger sound mixers nowadays, we have an understanding that there's a lot of programs that can do a lot in post. You know, Isotope can scrape dialogue out of almost anything, as long as, you know, as long as we record the
Except
dialogue.
the failed podcast that I wasn't able to actually salvage. It was insalvageable. I sounded like C-3PO
Whoa.
overdosing on fentanyl.
Oh my God. Whoa. Yeah, well, I mean, so not everything can be salvaged, but the vast majority of things can be salvaged. But some of the older mixers that I work with will, you know, like I am not hitting record. We are not doing a take until that audio issue has been taken care of. Like the electrics put their generator too close to set. The electrics need to move their generator, and I'm not rolling until they move their generator, like stuff like that. And I mean, they had to get that way for a reason. You know, sound often doesn't get the same considerations. So I can see how these mixers became the way that they did, and frankly, they record amazing sound. I mean, these are the people fighting these battles are the same people that have reputations for recording massive budget movies and not needing any ADR. So sometimes it's
Mm.
worth fighting those battles to be able to ensure that you can get a good take. But I personally like to be more of a fly on the wall. I don't. I think that everyone on set works a little bit more efficiently if we are a fly on the wall. And I think when I do that, then when I bring something up, it's taken really, really seriously. You know, like if the sound department that hasn't had any issues for the first 13 days of the set suddenly has an issue, it's like, whoa, we should take care of them. You know, like they've been pretty good. But there's also, you know, advantages to having a more vocal sound department,
Mm.
because then it really ensures that you're going to have a great project, and you kind of mentally forge your way into the first AD's mind. The more vocal you are, they'll be more likely to. The more vocal you are, and the more you bug them, the more likely they are going to hear other sound concerns and kind of be very quick to react on them, because the sound department has been vocal and they know that the sound department's going to freak out about that noise that just happened.
Mm.
So you know, there's advantages to both. I've worked with mixers that are both ways, and you know, there's a bunch of ways to go about doing sound. I think it's just kind of your personal preference.
Sure, sure. What? Oh God, I was holding that question for like a whole freaking minute, and then my brain decides to, pull the plug on the aux cord. But oh, what would make you say no to a project, or what are some reasons you've said no to projects other than just simply scheduling in the past?
Sure. Oh man, I don't want to. Well, I don't want to specifically call out a project. I think like sometimes content. Um, but I okay, I think I'm gonna pretty specifically call out a movie, but not. I'm gonna try not to. But there was a script that was approached to me about a time period that I was already booked, so like I couldn't have taken it anyway.
Okay.
Oh, there's Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
I don't remember the question that you asked me. I'm so sorry.
Oh well, the reasons that you would say, or actually, you're about to regale into a story about what made you say no to a particular project.
Oh yeah, so this movie approached me and I was already booked at that point regardless. Like I couldn't have done it, but I got sent the script, and the first line of the script was like gross eating noises, and like close up on mouth, gross eating noises, and I was like, "Oh god." And I read like the script and I was like, "This is fucking awesome." But I don't think I could mentally like I really can't like eating scenes already, like eating scenes, kissing scenes, and sex scenes in movies are the worst sounding things. They edit out so much of it in the final cut of the movie. It's horrible. So that was one that I wouldn't have been able to take it anyway, because
Just
when
too
they
much
said that they were
ASMR
filming,
or like just weird
yeah, I
vibes?
can't. Yeah, like everything sounds way grosser than you think it does, and when you have a mic really close to um the noise happening, I promise you it's not
That's
an incredibly
hilarious.
pleasant experience. So I wouldn't have been able to do that one anyway, and I think I just told them it was scheduling, but I frankly think I might have actually passed on that one if I was available, because I just would have been a little bit too much for me to handle. um but apparently I heard it got made, and it sounds like it's pretty good. So like I'm sure whoever did sound on it probably did a great job. I mean, some sound people are like, that sounds fucking dope, but me personally, not that's not that's not for me.
Are you also a germaphobe where like I can't touch that particular surface?
A little bit, yeah. I used to be a lot more of a germaphobe. um but a large part of my job is me having to get incredibly close to people and tape things to their body all the time, and people are like sweaty, and so I've definitely become less of a germaphobe, but I am, but the industry has worn me down over time.
You just get more callous to absolutely everything
Yeah,
the
for
older you
sure.
get.
So one of my favorite things to do when I take an actor's mic pack off of their ankle is, if it's like incredibly sweaty, I like to go up to whatever crew member is the closest to me at the time and go, "Do you want to feel something really sweaty?" And then normally people say no.
You start putting on doctor's gloves, like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
All right, I got a really technical question that I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
Um, and I'm slightly ignorant. I've had some experience, like at least both with podcasts and as well as with past projects when it comes to sound. But first, I'd like you to explain the nuances within the question, just to provide the context, and
Sure.
then answer the question. Um, how do you manage clipping or distortion when it comes to dealing with a wide dynamic range?
Sure. Yeah, okay. Do you just want me to like walk through the whole question for like the
Yeah,
audio 101?
because
Okay.
it's like I'm also like curious. Like I try to be a student as much as possible, and so like for me personally, I prefer to understand every aspect as much as I can of all the other departments. And
Yeah.
so knowing at least those things in the back of my mind, I just I think it makes you a better artist overall.
Yeah, for sure. And that is a really great question to ask. That's something really great to have on your mind. So clipping and distortion. So clipping is when you overload the gain on a microphone and it distorts the audio track. And for those of you that are not audio files, if you have watched any YouTube channel ever and someone gets like jump scared and they scream into the mic and the audio gets really distorted, that is what it sounds like.
Classic indie filmmaking, though. Just gotta
Yeah.
say it. Bad audio. That's like that's like a given. As soon as that happens, poof, like awards are gone. Doesn't matter. Everything is great. The rest, like it's sort of a notorious mistake in indie filmmaking.
Oh, for sure. Like you said, the sound department should be a fly on the wall. And when you're, something that I commonly say is that if no one comments on the sound, it means that we did a good job. Because the minute someone comments on the sound, it means that the sound person fucked up. Because if a sound person does a great job and it sounds natural, you are not thinking about it in any way. The if the DP does something really creative, you might be in the moment really feeling the emotion of the scene, and then the DP does this crazy like oneer, and like walls are exploding and there's a lighting change. um and you're thinking about it, you're like, wow, that's so cool, but we can do something really cool from a sound perspective, and no one will ever know because it sounds great. But the minute something clips, like you can never have anything clip in a movie, that because it's supposed to sound natural, and in real life, people's voices don't clip.
No.
Um, so a wide dynamic range. So a dynamic range is the variety of um, like loud, quiet. A super wide dynamic range often means that you might have someone both whispering and shouting in the same scene, and that is very much a technical challenge to us as sound people, because we're running multiple mics. On any given day, we've got the boom microphone, maybe two boom microphones. That's another thing I forgot to mention that the sound utility does. The sound utility will sometimes double boom if a scene needs two booms. So there might be one or two boom mics. All of the actors are wearing mics. We might have plant mics running. So I mean, in any given scene, if it's just two
Plant
people,
mics? You mean like what's that?
that would be if we just plant a microphone in the scene. And
Oh,
so they'd
like
normally be
hidden within the actual set, but you don't see it, but it is picking up the sound. Okay, so that's more like wide shots and stuff like that, or just hard to get into areas.
Yeah, and I mean, normally, typically, I mean, sets start wide and then move in. So we'll probably put in plants for the wide, but we'll still keep them on the closes because they sound really good. But what a plant might could look like, it might be um, visible in the scene in that, like, if it's a courtroom scene and there is already a microphone on the stand that they're using, we might just plug into that microphone and then literally use that microphone as a plant mic. Um, but we also very commonly what we'll do is we'll use a lav transmitter pack, and then we'll put a very short tiny shotgun microphone on it. Most standardly we use the DPA 4099s, which is like a really small tiny shotgun, and we'll like sticky it to the bottom of a table. So like,
Mm.
if like people are at an Applebee's, we'd like sticky it to the bottom of the table and have it pointing up at them. So um ideally in a way, in somewhere that you don't see it, so you've still got a little, good sounding shotgun microphone at the actor. So yeah, I mean, if two people at an Applebee's, right? So that's two people at a table, but there's a big light above them, so you
Okay.
can't put the boom in the middle. That would be two booms because that's going to be shadow city everywhere. So if you want to try and get good, you know, and then also they're probably talking over each other if both the people are in the scene. If it's just closes on each of them, we'll kindly ask the director to not have the actors talk over each other so that it's easier to edit. But if both of the actors are in the scene, the actors might be talking over each other, and you can't swing the boom that much because it's going to be shadow city, and there's a big light fixture in the way. So it's two booms, and then both of the actors are wearing microphones, and then we also probably have two plant mics underneath them. So in just a two-person scene, that's six
I
microphones.
can feel the stress. I can feel the
Yeah.
stress. I can feel all the logistics. It's like half of the sound on set just isn't even you like making sure your equipment's working. You have to also make sure that you're as incognito as possible, and then like not running interference with absolutely every other element on set.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because like art doesn't want to see your microphone, and you can't have boom shadows, and you have to work around the lights that were put up. And sometimes if you're friends with the gaffer, you can very kindly ask them to diffuse a light for you, and they'll do it. And most of the gaffers that I've worked with are very kind, and they'll do that. But sometimes you work with a really mean gaffer, which I have, and there's 34 spotlights hanging from the ceiling, and you just have to find a way to make the boom work, and there's nothing you can do about it. And
Gaffers
like,
might be like the more like the gaffers. They gaffers as well as the ones who set up the some of the logistical elements for lighting, which typically ends up being the gaffer, but sometimes it's a specialized lighting technician. They tend to be the crappiest. Like I don't know, like
mm-hmm.
if the first one, if you're running a really long ass day, once you get to like hour 12 out of 14, boom, the first one to go. Those are the gaffers. Those are the ones. They're the first ones to go and get crabby.
As someone who very heavily is at the mercy of the lighting of any particular scene, I will never shit on a gaffer. And I think gaffers are great and I love them. And don't ever tell any gaffer that I shat on their lighting. I
I
don't want to
won't.
piss off any gaffers. Um, but the vast majority of the gaffers and all the electrics I've worked with have been absolutely wonderful sweethearts. Um, yeah, there's a ton of elements that we as sound people need to problem solve and work around. And so in the scene that I just described, to get back to your original question about dynamic range and
Hmm.
handling the clipping and the distortion, let's say in this Applebee's, these two people are also whispering and shouting in the same scene. And so that's difficult on our end because we have to set all the mics at a certain gain level. So the gain level is using like super layman's terms. It's how much audio the mic is expecting to pick up. So,
Waveform input.
yeah, like so like the gain level is just, you want to set the gain to what you expect the actor to do in the scene. This is the same as in live sound. You set the gain, you do a sound check, and you set the gain of the mic based on the approximate volume that the musician is playing. So in a
Hmm.
scene, if the actor is going to be whispering the whole time, you want to set the gain up super high because that means, you need a ton of gain to pick up really quiet sounds. Whereas in a rock concert, you're going to set the gain super low on the guitarist who has his cab turned up all the way because he thinks he's
I
um,
see. Yeah.
he thinks he's in Led Zeppelin and he wants everyone to hear his sound. So you basically just turn the gain down all the way. So how you set the gain is how you stop clipping and distortion. Um, so in a whispering scene, you want to set the gain super high, but if it looks like they're going to start yelling, you got to bump that gain way down, because if your mic is set at a high gain and the person starts yelling, that's when it's going to start clipping. So what we have on our end as sound people is we have gain structure, is what it's called, which is just a ton of fail safes. So we don't just set the gain on the microphone, but we set the gain at multiple various points before it gets recorded. And that gain structure is what really prevents and protects us from clipping. And I know, like in a digital interface, like you can use like Pro Tools or something, and in Pro Tools
Mm-hmm.
you can run it through like and you can just run it through you can run it through any number of plugins that might like limit it or whatnot, or you can run
Some
it through
type
a
of
bus.
equalizer.
Yeah, you can run it through you can run it through any number of buses that might would affect your gain structure and would be able to help you with that. So on our end, what our gain structure looks like is we set the gain on the microphone, and then we can also set the gain on the recorder. We set the gain on the microphone, and then if it's wireless, if it's not just like hardwired, if it's wireless, we can set the gain on the transmitter. We also set the gain on the receiver. So the receiver is what's being outputted. So, if our person's whispering and the audio is coming in super quiet, even though we have our gain up as high as it can be, it's still coming in a little quiet from the transmitter. So on the receiver, we can like bump up the output a little bit, so that way when it's going into our recorder, we're still getting it at approximately the level that we're supposed to, which would be about negative 12 decibels. So
I
you can
see.
kind of bump it up on the receiver. And then on your mixer, you can also set the gain there. So that's where the actual mixing comes in. You can set the gain from the mixer, and from there, there's faders with gain trim, so you can get super particular with it. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to set the gain and not change it before a take starts, on the transmitter, the receiver, and on your mixer, so that you can just use the faders, which is just like the very small gain trim. And you want to try and figure everything out and get it nailed in, so during the scene you can use the fader and really use that to make a mix.
Mm.
So with these two people talking, the faders are what you're going to use to it might only be a few decibels, but that's what we're using to create the mix. That's what we're using to make it natural. So the faders would be, this, I'm talking to you, so you'd bring my fader up. And then when I stop talking, then we bring your fader up, and you come up and sound. And so that's what we use to make it sound natural, and what it would sound like in a natural
The
environment.
onset
So
DJ.
the onset DJ for sure. So ideally we have multiple points of failure to prevent clipping, because we would have seen a rehearsal, and in the rehearsal we can kind of have an idea of where to set our gain structure at, to keep things from clipping. And I know in your world, in the podcast world, you don't necessarily have a sound, a rehearsal or a sound check to try and test these things, but there are, there's limiters, and there's EQ and compression that you can run your buses through that can kind of help prevent clipping too much. And then you just have to pray for the mercy of the person to have the foresight to not start screaming without warning you. So, so yeah, sorry, that's like my super dorky look into game structure. And
No, I prefer honestly more technical explanations. I mean, there's so many questions that like, and this is kind of this I can reveal a little bit. Like one of the reasons why I started this podcast wasn't just like, oh my gosh, what was your funny favorite on-set experience? Or like, what's your favorite color? It's like I myself, want that level of in-depth knowledge. And so the more type of people I bring on that I'm not necessarily familiar with, once I get into their head and then I see exactly how their craft works, to me, that is what makes it absolutely fascinating. If you look at to get a little bit historical here for a second, when you look at the scientists, as well as if you look at like middle-aged scientists if you're talking about like Roger Bacon, Isaac Newton, those types of guys, they weren't just scientists. They were also artists. They had a lot of different aspects. And so one of the things that I find fascinating, particularly about artists, is that usually there's a little bit of a geeky side that happens, and that's kind of, there's this weird dichotomy, this duality in their mind. And usually the art is a product of the nerdy aspect and the dreamer. And then, that's where you get the beauty from. And getting
Yeah.
into that, I think, honestly, is where you not just get to know the person, but you also get insights into the craft itself. And so for me, that's why I like to, bring on artists, because I want to know about their craft, not just their experiences. Those are great and they're entertaining, but that little bit of meat, I think, for me personally, is what serves my soul. So, that's
Yeah. Oh, that was gorgeous. Oh my gosh. That
yeah.
was
I'm
beautiful.
I'm a writer, so I like I tend to be a little bit more poetic with things.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
oh my gosh, that was beautiful.
yeah. Put that on a poster or crochet it on a pillow.
Yeah, turn it into like a t-shirt for your podcast, like
Yeah,
focal
it would be
point.
like
I'm
the Star Wars text scrolling, except it just gets smaller and smaller at the bottom.
Yeah. Exactly.
um, we are getting close on our time, but I really wanted to get to a little bit know about, and this is an experience question about your experience working on the set with oh gosh, what was the movie called? Alarum, is that how you say it? Alarum
Oh,
with uh
alarum or
Alarum, yeah, with
alarum. Oh
I
my
said I was a
God.
writer. I didn't say I could pronounce things properly.
You you did your research. Oh my God. That's not
Yeah, that was with Clint Eastwood's Scott Eastwood,
Scott
Sylvester
Eastwood, yeah.
Stallone. I forget the
Scott
guy,
Eastwood, yeah.
Coulter, the Luke Cage guy, and there's some names in there. And but it was like
Mike,
only like an hour
yeah.
and a half movie, but it was rated R, and that was fairly recent. Can you tell me about like your role on that, and what was your experience being on that type of set?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that set was wow, that is one that I talk about a lot. I almost wore the fashion forward to quote the one of the first ACs on the shoot, the very fashion forward alarum shirts. Because the shirts that they gave us at the end of production are like the worst things that we've ever seen. And I almost wore it for this podcast, but I was like, I actually want people to take me seriously on the podcast. So
Was it
that's
like a
why I wear
meme
my
shirt?
IATSE one. No, it's so funny. It's like the worst shirt. So that movie, okay. So Larum is by the at the time it was EFO. I don't know what they're called now because they keep constantly going under, but it's this production company run by Randall Emmett. So Randall Emmett is this guy who was on the show Vanderpump Rules, which I had never heard of, but there's like a 20% chance I mention that to people and they go, "What?" It's like a shitty reality show. So this guy Randall Emmett, who is on this like reality show, runs this production company where he makes these movies that are largely suspected to be money laundering schemes. And how he goes about doing them is he makes these movies with like a pretty big budget, but like most of the paycheck goes to a famous old guy who is on set for like 1 or 2 days. And then they market the movie as if the famous old guy is in like most of the movie. So if you watch the Alarum trailer, um, there's a lot of Sylvester Stallone in it. And we had Sylvester Stallone for a day and a half. So we had him for a 12-hour day and then we had him for an 8-hour day. And after 8 hours, he left. It didn't matter that we didn't get
That
shit done.
reminds
Like
me of a Bruce
he's
Willis movie that
gone.
was shot here, actually.
That was the same company. Yeah.
Same company as that one?
Yeah. So I know like Point Blank, the Bruce Willis one was shot here and there's another one too. But yeah, they used to make all the Bruce Willis movies. That was kind of how Bruce Willis would make a lot of his money. Unfortunately, when he was going through his mental decline, is because these movies would
Mm-hmm.
just keep having him where he only has to work for like a day or two. Um, the one of the sound mixers that I work with a lot, Jeff Maxwell actually did quite a few of those, and he mentioned, um, that Bruce Willis would have to have an earpiece in because someone would have to read his lines to him, because at that point he was in a state of cognitive decay, unfortunately. Um, but up until the De Niro movie that I worked on, in which we had to use the earwigs a lot, the Bruce Willis movie was at that point it was Jeff's most prominent experience with using earwigs on a set because Bruce Willis had to have that earpiece in to have his lines read to him. But just a little fun fact, a little bit of trivia on those Bruce Willis movies. Anyway, so yeah, so we had Sylvester Stallone for like a day and a half, and they market the movie as if he's in the whole thing. If you watch the trailer, it's probably like 70% of all of Sylvester Stallone's lines in the movie are in the trailer because they make it look like Sylvester Stallone's in the whole movie when he's not.
That was the
Um,
impression that I got when I saw the trailer for it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
yeah, no, we had him for like 2 days. And there were a lot of shady practices on that set. From yeah, from like a union perspective, they got in trouble a lot with the union over the course of filming that. And it's been one of my favorite projects to have worked on. like, you know, after the movie has come out, because the union keeps finding them for like random shit, and I keep getting like random $200 checks in the mail from them for shit that like they were supposed to have paid me for but didn't. So that's been really nice. um
That's dope. Just
yeah,
kidding.
I know, that's really
Like,
awesome.
thanks. I don't have a lawyer or stake involved, but thanks for the money. Like,
Like, thank
honestly,
you for
that,
the money.
yeah.
Yeah, man, we had like, there was like a day, I like a story that I tell very frequently from that set is like, so the whole, okay, just a preface, the whole movie takes place in largely the course of a single evening. Like, there's a, the first scene is a flashback, and then after that it takes place, you know, in one evening. So up until, it's supposed to be set in Poland, but we had not gotten any snow. We filmed the movie in like, I think February of 2024, and it had not snowed at all. So we're filming a scene, and then it starts snowing a little bit before lunch, and then we notice at lunch all of the producers go home, and then after lunch it has like just blizzard, and there's like a foot of snow on the ground. So from a continuity perspective, this outdoor scene that we have to film is just, the continuity is just thrown out the window because there's a foot of snow on the ground and it's blizzarding, at which point it doesn't in any other part of the movie. So if you watch the movie, there's like randomly two scenes in which it's like super blizzarding and there's a foot of snow on the ground, and they just kept it in because they don't care about continuity in these movies. They're just like money laundering schemes, probably, don't quote me on that, but you know, these people
Allegedly.
truly do not,
Allegedly. It's
they
allegedly.
don't care. Like, they don't care about continuity at all. So like, the producers all like left, and but they still wanted us to finish out our day. So we, you know, we do a few quick shots, and then it gets to a certain point when the roads are just too bad for us to continue. So we were filming in Houston Woods, which is near Oxford in
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Ohio. Yeah. So where we were filming in Houston Woods, so our base camp was in one of the parking lots. We were filming like a 15-minute van ride away from there, and most of the crew were working as locals. So we're driving home to our houses every night, which for most of us in Cincinnati is about an hour, 10-ish minute drive. So the producers are already back cozy in their hotel rooms at this point. So we're trying to leave set, and vans are driving down to pick us up, and they cannot leave the set because we're filming down a hill and the roads are just so icy, like vans can't
Mm-hmm.
leave the set. So then eventually, like, we work out the solution where we just have to hike like a quarter of a mile to get up to the top of the hill, and then vans can start picking us up. But they were like slipping off the road. I saw a van with people in it slide off the road. Like, the van that I was in was fine, but like crazy shit like that was happening. And then we're asking production for hotel rooms because we're filming at the hotel in Houston Woods. There's a hotel right there. So all of us are like, can you buy us hotel rooms because it's not safe to get home? And they're like, yeah, we'll buy you guys hotel rooms in Blue Ash by the production office, which is a 45-minute drive away from Houston Woods. So at that point, I was like, I'm just gonna go home. Apparently, they did end up buying. I think like the G&E guys ended up staying the night because they had a really long tear down that night. But it was just like it was just one of the most blatant, like, the producers not caring about the crew I had ever seen. I almost wrecked like a bunch on the way home. Like, it was just so. The movie's like, haha, funny. They don't care about continuity, and they're just like, you know, the producers don't care about this movie at all, but they also just genuinely don't care about the crew working on it. So, you know, that's a story that I like to bring up a lot in
What
terms of
was
set
did
safety.
the main talent, like, what was their reaction to their experience on set? Like, could you see, like, obviously they, I would imagine, like, you know, Scott Eastwood, and then you know, the Coulter guy, Luke
Oh,
Cage.
Mike, yeah, Mike,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, what was their reaction when they're like, what's going on here? But did they have that, like, that look on their face once they kind of saw more or less what the vibe was like on set?
Yeah, I could tell that the actors were getting frustrated. At a certain point, I don't necessarily know if that's my story to tell, but I could definitely see among most of the actors a certain level of frustration. And it wasn't run in a way that was very respectful to the actors, in any way, shape, or form. So a lot of the actors were just getting frustrated, in that regard. One of the actors, like, they would call him and he would show up at the start of the day, and then they expected to need him for like the second scene, but then we'd run late, so you know, he's already been here in costume ready to go for like 5 or 6 hours, and we haven't needed him yet. So he would just like take his costume off and go home, and frankly, I don't blame him because that's not the norm on most movies. You know, we most
Mm.
in most movies, the actors are the number one priority, and the scheduling is 100% around the actors in a way that's not going to piss the actors off. um I mean, I've been on some, like, I mean, Robert De Niro would go back to his trailer in between like every single setup, you know, like, like you just have to work around the actors. I mean, these actors are understandably getting pretty frustrated, um, but I still thought most of them did a good job. Um, I mean, I think Stallone had a good time
For a
because
day
if
and
there
a
was any
half
actor that,
or two
yeah, if there
days.
was any actor that they were catering to, it was him and him alone. But yeah, I don't. I think the crew was not alone in that. No one was really treated incredibly well on that movie. But I do got to say, it was some of the most fun I've had on a movie because when it's very clear, a couple days in that this is not a real movie and that production truly doesn't care about the quality.
It goes to
We
show though that like even if you're at that like if you're even a list actor, you're like there is a chance you're going to walk into like one of these types of productions, you know.
yeah,
And like there's no that risk is always there. And so, I can kind of understand now even it's even why A-list actors are they seem paranoid, And I always wonder if like is that like I wouldn't want to say it's like is it ego or is it just vanity or like any other like visibly subjective view of like a negative characteristic about themselves, but like they they make their money off of their name, and when
yeah.
they kind of have to be more careful and like I kind of understand the paranoia, honestly.
Oh, for sure. And I think being famous is kind of a curse. I would never ever want to be famous. I almost debated saying no to this because I don't like I don't know, just being famous in any way, even just like being on a
Don't worry, the
podcast really.
podcast is early enough on. You're fine.
Yeah, like being famous just really freaks me out. Like having people, have perceptions of you and opinions on you and you don't even know who they are, that just really freaks me out. And I mean, with some of the most famous people on the planet, I don't necessarily blame them for not being incredibly chatty or wanting to meet people. I mean, by God, everyone in the world wants to meet them. And at the end of the day, when you're working with them and you're just a coworker, and the vast majority of actors I've worked with have all been absolute sweethearts, and they sweat just like everyone else.
Hmm.
I can tell you with certainty that they sweat just like everyone else. um,
you've
but
you've stuck enough law of mics on them in order to know that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I there is at the end of the De Niro one, the ankle pack that he had on the end of the movie, I took it off, and my sound mixer joked. He's like, "You could probably sell that for a lot of money." I was like, "Yeah, probably." But we usually wash them at the end of the shoot, and make them good for the next person. Or we wash them midway through. He kept his ankle pack the whole movie, but we try and wash them and keep it all clean. Um, yeah, man, like being famous sounds terrifying. But the vast majority of people I've worked with have all been sweethearts. But just like your point, I mean, being famous doesn't protect you from the same issues that you might have, on a lower budget set. You can definitely have a lot more say in things and have a lot more protections. It's not uncommon for actors, the more famous that they are, to have demands, and that, like De Niro wanted his trailer by set at all times so he could go into his trailer in between takes. And I mean, by God, the man's 80. I don't blame him. But still somehow had a kid. But it's,
Right.
um, um, some of them are really chill. I mean, I day played on Nutcrackers for a bit, and like Ben Stiller was just incredibly chill and kind the whole time. But
I'm
I mean,
loving Severance. I'm loving Severance at the moment. His work I think is one of the great examples of like, let artists be artists,
yeah. And I only worked on that for a bit, but I know from everyone else that worked on it the whole run of the movie that they said that he was just like a gem and a sweetheart, and that he didn't wasn't incredibly demanding or anything. And part of that I think might just be because he's making Severance now, so he's at this point been on both sides of the camera and understands what it's like. But um, he was a sweetheart, and I mean, I don't blame De Niro for having demands. I mean, it's he is who he is. He can, by God, he can have his trailer and go back to his trailer in between setups. By God, he can have a comfy couch to sit on. So, but yeah, again, it doesn't necessarily protect you from the issues that happen to hit production from time to time. So
Right.
there's issues on all levels of production, and you just gotta have a good attitude and be willing to be friendly and work around it and just treat people like they're people, and that's going to help you through like 99% of all the issues. And as long as you do that, then whatever issues happen, people tend to side with you and not against you. So it's the best you can do.
Well,
And worst comes to worst, just quit the
that's
project. No
entertaining as
movie
hell,
is
I gotta say.
yeah. no movie is worth losing your life. So just, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how cool the project is. At a certain point, you can always just quit.
Yeah.
There's more movies out there.
That's true. Well, Kerry, it's been great talking to you and great getting to know you. I appreciate your
Anthony,
insights.
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been an honor to be on this podcast. Good luck. I don't want to hear any. I don't want to hear any clipping. I don't want to hear any gain modulation throughout. I will be judging you
fingers
based on the
crossed.
audio quality
Fingers
of
crossed.
Even though I meant to record this using an actual microphone and I couldn't get it to work, so I'm just using my AirPods, which is like the most embarrassing thing. And I'm totally going to be listening to this when it comes out, incredibly unhappy with my audio. So I will be judging you. This is great. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
No, not really. Just thank you for having me on. You've had a lot of my friends on this podcast, and in all of their episodes, you've had, such great, awesome questions. And I thank you for taking the time to ask me super awesome, cool questions as well. It means a lot, and I can't wait to hear your future episodes.
All right. Well, have a good one. Thanks for coming on.
You too. Thanks, man.
No problem.
Bye.